You've heard about the big ones, wars, disasters, and global scandals. But what about the eerie, twisted moments history forgot to mention? These are the 10 darkest moments in history you've never heard of, and it's time to uncover them. The Great Molasses Flood. Imagine a 25-foot high wave of sticky, sweet death rushing at 35 miles per hour through a city street. That's exactly what happened on January 15, 1919, when a massive storage tank filled with over 2 million gallons of molasses exploded in Boston's North End. The tank was part of the Purity Distilling Company, and the engineers had ignored warning signs for months: leaks, cracks, and strange vibrations. When it gave way, the flood flattened buildings, tossed train cars like toys, and knocked people off their feet. The pressure was so intense that steel girders twisted like ribbons, and entire blocks were left in a sticky, ruined mess. 21 people died that day, more than 150 were injured, and rescue efforts were a nightmare. Molasses hardened like concrete in the winter cold. The cleanup took over 87,000 man-hours, and for decades after, Bostonians swore the streets still smelled like syrup. It wasn't just a freak accident, it was corporate negligence on a deadly scale. And somehow this bizarre catastrophe is barely taught in schools. Sweet, but deadly. The Dancing Plague. No one knows how it started, but once it did, it couldn't be stopped. In the summer of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into a street in Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, and began to dance furiously. Within days, dozens more joined her, dancing non-stop for hours, then days, then weeks. Some even collapsed from exhaustion. Others broke bones or suffered heart attacks. At least 15 people were thought to have died, and doctors were baffled. The town council even hired musicians, thinking the dancers would simply dance it out. But the opposite happened. It fueled the mania. Some historians think it was mass hysteria triggered by stress or famine, and others point to a hallucinogenic mold on bread called ergot. But no theory has ever been confirmed. It was a mysterious outbreak of human behavior that no one could stop, explain, or prevent. And to this day, it's one of the strangest mass incidents in recorded history. The Radium Girls. It was thought to be glamorous. In the early 1920s, young women were hired to paint watch dials with glow-in-the-dark radium paint at companies like the US Radium Corporation. They were told the paint was harmless, so they dipped their brushes in their mouths for precision, painting their nails with it for fun, and even used it as lip gloss. The result? Horrific internal damage. Their teeth fell out, their bones deteriorated, and their jaws literally disintegrated. When they tried to speak out, they were silenced, laughed at, disbelieved, and blamed for their own suffering. But in 1928, a group of them, now called the Radium Girls, fought back in court. They exposed a cover-up that ran deep, revealing how executives knew about radium's dangers but prioritized profit. Their bravery led to major changes in labor laws and workplace safety laws. But it came far too late for many. They were glowing and dying. The Night of Terror. You'd think fighting for the right to vote wouldn't lead to torture, but in 1917, it did. A group of suffragists from the National Women's Party were peacefully picketing outside the White House when they were arrested and sent to Occoquan Workhouse in Virginia. What happened next became known as the Night of Terror. Guards beat them mercilessly, slammed their heads into walls, and threw them into dark, freezing cells. Lucy Burns was chained to her cell door with her hands above her head, left hanging all night. Others were force-fed through rubber tubes, a brutal and dehumanizing process. The women had committed no crime, only demanding a basic human right. When the story leaked, it caused national outrage and helped turn the tide in the battle for the 19th Amendment. But the trauma these women endured was swept under the rug for decades. A silent war for freedom fought behind prison bars. The Tulsa Race Massacre. For decades, this horrifying event was erased from the history books. In 1921, the Greenwood district of Tulsa, an affluent black community named Black Wall Street, was attacked by a white mob after a false accusation against a young black man. Over 2 days, 35 square blocks were burned to the ground. Homes, businesses, and even hospitals were destroyed. Eyewitnesses reported being dropped from planes, yes, aerial attacks in a US city. More than 1,200 homes were torched, hundreds of people were injured, and it's estimated that up to 300 were killed, though exact numbers were still unknown. Survivors were rounded up into internment camps and insurance claims were denied en masse. And then, silence. It wasn't taught and it wasn't acknowledged. Only in recent years has it begun to receive the recognition and memorialization it deserves. It was a massacre hidden in plain sight. History tried to forget, but we won't. The Great Smog of London. In December 1952, London became a city of death in the fog. A thick yellow-black smog descended over the city and refused to lift for 5 days straight. But it wasn't just ordinary fog, it was toxic air loaded with pollutants from coal fires, factories, and vehicle emissions. Visibility dropped to near zero. Public transportation halted. Even indoor events were canceled because the smoke crept inside. Even hospitals were overwhelmed. People began collapsing in the streets, gasping for breath. By the time the air cleared, at least 4,000 people had died, though later studies suggested the real number was over 12,000. It was one of the worst environmental disasters in European history, and it changed everything, forcing the UK to pass the Clean Air Act of 1956. The Great Smog wasn't just weather, it was a warning, and a deadly reminder of what happens when we poison the skies. Project Sunshine. This one sounds innocent until you find out what it really was. In the 1950s, the US government and military ran a project called Sunshine, a secret study to measure the effects of nuclear fallout on the human body. But here's the catch, they used body parts without permission, many of them from the deceased infants and children. Bodies were stripped of bones and tissues and used for experiments. The goal was to understand how radioactive isotopes like strontium-90 accumulated in human bones. It was science, yes, but it crossed every line of ethics. Parents who lost children had no idea their loved ones were being used in classified research. When it finally came to light, public outrage was enormous. It's one of the darkest examples of science gone rogue, hidden under the cloak of national security. Project Sunshine, where the sun never should have shined. The Guinea Pig Kids. In the heart of New York City, at a group home called Incarnation Children's Center, an experiment was happening, but not the kind anyone signed up for. Between the late 1980s and early 2000s, vulnerable kids, most of them orphans in foster care, were enrolled in drug trials without proper consent. These trials were designed to test the safety of medications, but instead of careful oversights, kids were forced into treatments that made them extremely ill. Some were given drugs through feeding tubes when they refused to swallow. Others were removed from foster homes if their guardians questioned the tests. Whistleblowers and investigative journalists eventually uncovered the scale of the abuse. Though intended as medical research, it veered dangerously into exploitation. These children were never given a voice, no headlines, no justice, just lost names in a forgotten experiment. Unit 731. You've heard of the horrors of World War II, but this is a chapter almost no one talks about. Unit 731 was a secret division of the Japanese Imperial Army located in Harbin, China. It carried out unspeakable experiments on Chinese civilians and prisoners of war, all under the name of scientific advancement. Victims were subjugated to frostbite testing, starvation studies, and biological warfare trials. They were exposed to plagues, vivisections, and chemical agents without anesthesia or even basic human decency. The unit's leader, General Shiro Ishii, oversaw the operation with chilling efficiency. And here's the kicker. After the war, many of these scientists were given immunity by the US in exchange for their research data. No trials and no jail. Just dark knowledge traded for darker science. It's history's most horrifying deal with the devil. The Congo Free State. This is colonialism at its most brutal. Between 1885 and 1908, the Congo Free State, ruled personally by King Leopold II of Belgium, became a blood-soaked labor camp. Under the guise of civilization, Leopold's agents enslaved millions to harvest rubber, ivory, and resources. Failure to meet quotas meant punishment. Hands were cut off as warnings to others. Even entire villages were burned. Families were torn apart. Estimates say that up to 10 million people died during the Reign of Terror. But the worst part, Leopold never even set foot in the Congo. He orchestrated the whole operation from Europe. International outcry finally forced Belgium to take control in 1908, ending his personal rule, but the damage was already done. This isn't just a dark moment, it's a dark era erased from most of human history. The Congo Free State, a kingdom built on bones. So, history isn't just dates and dusty books, it's full of hidden horrors and shocking secrets that still echo today. But if this video blew your mind, imagine what else is out there waiting to be uncovered. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more mind-bending history, and drop a comment telling me which moment shocked you the most. I will see you in the next video.